Welcome, 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 everybody. Thank you for joining our session today, making ISO 45003 practical. This is all about managing psychosocial risk at work today. This has been quite a popular session for people wanting to know more about this new set of guidance and standard from ISO. So we are very excited to have you all joining us. You may just hear people dinging and donging in the background as they join. As usual, we'll have some stragglers, but we prefer to have them with us today than not. So don't mind what's going on in the background for the first couple of minutes. But let's get started. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Emily Pearson and I'm the founder and CEO of the Wellbeing Lead Academy. Next slide, please, Vicky. But keep forgetting that I have to do that. So just a little bit about me. I am now multi-award winning. This was the latest award at the Woman Who Awards for Excellence in Business on Friday. Thank you very much. I have been working in this space for almost 10 years now in workplace wellbeing, but my background is health and social care. So I have a background in psychology, counselling, health and social care as a practitioner and an educator. So once I became very burnt out from working frontline as a practitioner, I decided to train, specialise in becoming an educator in health and social care. At the Wellbeing Lead Academy, we help clients to develop and deliver impactful wellbeing strategies that actually work and see a return on investment. We also provide the only UK's national accredited career pathway for wellbeing leadership, all the way up to a level 5. And the level 5 is the only advanced certificate at foundation degree level. So it's the equivalent to doing a foundation degree. There's nothing else like it in the whole of the world, even never mind the UK. We are also recognised by the Society of Occupational Medicine, and I'm also the author of the soon-to-be published leadership and business book called Solving a CEO's Blind Spot: Human Sustainability. So that's just a little bit about me and why I'm here today talking about ISO 45003. I'm just going to now ask Victoria to move on to the slide. Vicky, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, thanks, Emily. So I'm Vicky. I have won a couple of awards myself, but none as notable and as recent as Emily has. I have a master's qualification in workplace health and wellbeing, or occupational health psychology, as it's also known. And I've delivered, implemented, and designed wellbeing strategies across quite a number of large and complex organisations. The reason I'm going to be talking to you today is that I've got experience of the end-to-end process, in fact, of ISO 45003, having delivered it within an organisation that I worked in a number of years ago. And yeah, so I'm really interested to get through today's presentation and give you some really useful insights, hopefully, and take some questions at the end.
Brilliant. I think Vic's probably, a very, very minority in terms of people with this level of expertise. So we're very, very privileged to have her with us here today. So just a little bit about to you. Oh,
No,
it's not. This one's
this is you.
mine. So, if you are already part of our ecosystem and community, you will have seen already that we sent out a newsletter the other day to let you know that the Jockey Members Club has just awarded a former colleague just under £1 million. It was £990,000 due to what they're classing as psychiatric injury. This was an injury caused specifically by work-related stress. The marketing manager had raised the concerns, said that they were experiencing stress, and they failed to respond to it. This led to a private, public. No, it's not a public. Oh, my words are not going to come out today. A litigation, anyway, there's another word for it that just isn't going to come today. A litigation which meant that this payout was specifically around psychiatric injury and due to a lack of the prevention of work-related stress. So I just wanted to start off there because ultimately we are seeing this over and over again that we're starting to see more attention being paid to psychosocial risk and injury from HSC than ever before. We are starting to see more injury claims. Yay, personal injury claims. That was the word that wasn't coming to us. We are starting to see, and we will see this escalate as we usually do. Once something has broke the seal, we will start to see more injury claims and the HSE out investigating more organisations, which is why we're here today to help you to prevent this from happening. Over to you, Vicky.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah, and thanks for the intro. So as I've already mentioned, I'm Vicky. I'm just going to let one last person in because that is the level of my multitasking for
I'll do
now.
it. I'll do it.
Thanks, Emily. And as we've already mentioned, I've led and been involved in the end-to-end process of ISO 45003. So this webinar is based on the actual experience and understanding of this standard. And I want to start with a question that I hear a lot from organisations and people that I talk to. We know that ISO 45003 is important, but where do we actually begin? And for many teams, so whether you're here and you sit in HR or wellbeing, occupational health or health and safety, and I'm sure there's a number of other roles as well, because wellbeing seems to sit inside of everything at the moment, this can actually feel quite overwhelming for us. You've already got limited time, you've probably got competing priorities, and no clear roadmap. So today's webinar is about simplifying that and making it feel achievable for you. So let's start with the why. Why is psychological risk rising up the agenda? Well, we already know that work-related stress is the number one cause of sickness absence, despite it being a legal obligation to prevent since 1999. Most recent data actually tells us that 1 million workers were suffering from work-related stress, depression or anxiety in the 2024-2025 HSE statistics. We also know in the same period and from the same data source that there were 22.1 working days lost due to work-related stress, depression or anxiety. We also know that burnout is associated with employees being 119% less productive, and that stat is actually from the Healthiest Workplaces report. And 42% of employees say they feel uncomfortable discussing their mental health in the workplace. So essentially, poor mental health has become a core workplace risk. Business cost has become too big for us to ignore, and legal and regulatory expectations are now tightening. So let's get started with what ISO 45003 is. It's an international guidance standard focused on psychological health and safety at work. Under frameworks like ISO 45003, well-being's not positioned as a discretionary initiative or a benefits package. It's recognised as a core organisational risk that requires the same level of leadership oversight as any other business critical risk. So that means that accountability cannot sit solely with HR. Leaders shape the workload, they shape the culture, they give us role clarity, psychological safety, and they are heavily involved in the pace of change, all of which are major drivers of work-related stress and burnout. So the shift organisations are now trying to make is from asking, well, what wellbeing initiatives do we offer? And now we're moving into how are we designing work in a way that protects our psychological health? Ultimately, this becomes a leadership stewardship issue, embedding well-being into decision making. We're embedding well-being into governance and organizational design rather than treating it as a standalone people initiative. So, what does ISO 45003 bring organisations? Well, it delivers benefits across three levels, and that's people, performance, and protection. At a people level, it improves well-being and engagement. At a performance level, it drives productivity and it reduces errors. And at a protection level, it reduces organisational risk. So that includes legal, reputational, operational risk. And what's important is that it gives structure to something that many organisations struggle with, how to systematically manage psychosocial risks rather than relying on ad hoc wellbeing initiatives. So I just want to look at each of those individually. So the first, it's about reducing business risk. So ISO 45003 identifies and manages psychosocial hazards. It also strengthens the duty of care alongside 45001. It improves employee well-being. So ISO 45003 promotes psychologically safe and supportive workplaces. It also boosts performance and productivity, so there's higher engagement and motivation, and there are fewer errors and incidents linked to stress, so therefore there's better decision making and collaboration. It strengthens culture and leadership, so that's by encouraging open communication and trust. It improves management capability around well-being, and it embeds accountability for psychological safety. And one that is starting to become more embedded in organisations that some of you may already be involved in is around ESG credentials and reputation. So ISO 45003 demonstrates commitment to mental health and safety, and it does align with growing investor and stakeholder expectations. So it supports ESG, sustainability, and social value reporting. And finally, it drives consistency and structure. So ISO 45003 provides a clear, internationally recognised framework that integrates wellbeing into existing systems and processes and moves organisations from reactive to proactive. So just wanted to cover this off as part of the webinar as well, because I often get the question about what the difference is between ISO 45001 and ISO 45003. I'm going to start dropping the ISO part now because just saying it every single time might take up more time than the webinar. So 45001 is the core occupational health and safety standard. It provides the overall framework for identifying and managing workplace risks, traditionally focused on physical safety, but also applicable a bit more broadly. 45003 builds on that foundation by focusing specifically on psychological health and safety. So it introduces guidance on managing psychosocial risks such as excessive workload. And the key difference is that ISO 45001 is certifiable, meaning organisations are formally assessed against that ISO standard. But ISO 45003 is not. It's a guidance document and it's designed to support and enhance an existing ISO 45001 system. So basically, in simple terms, ISO 45001 tells organisations what they need to have in place for a safe system of work. 45003 helps them apply that system to mental health and well-being. So together they move organisations from just preventing physical harm to actually creating healthy, sustainable workplaces. Traditionally, many organisations have approached this through wellbeing initiatives like apps, awareness campaigns, awareness days, running regular webinars. And these things are pretty valuable, but they are normally reactive. They're there to solve a problem. But what ISO 45003 encourages is a shift in mindset. So from supporting people after issues arise to actively identifying and managing the risks that cause those issues in the first place. So it's about that prevention piece, not just support. This slide's really about the positive organisational outcomes that we want people to see that come from managing psychosocial risk well, not just avoiding harm, but actually creating a healthier and higher performing workplace. At the centre of ISO 45003 is the idea that when people are healthier and feel supported and psychologically safe at work, both the individual and the organisation is going to benefit. That translates into improved productivity and performance because people are better able to focus, they can collaborate better, and they will sustain that performance over time. It also helps reduce stress and burnout by addressing the root causes, so things like workload, organisational culture, maybe role clarity, and it brings us stronger well-being environments that create stronger relationships and teamwork because trust, communication, and psychological safety improve. From an organisational perspective, that then contributes to lower absenteeism and turnover, improved retention and stronger overall culture, and ultimately organisations become way more sustainable and more resilient, so they're better able to adapt, they can retain their talent, they perform consistently, and that comes through those periods of pressure and change as well. And that really links back to the purpose of today's presentation. 45,003 isn't just about compliance, it's about creating a healthier, more sustainable way of working that supports both people and organisational performance. So let's just briefly dig into psychosocial risks just to help you understand them better because they're a core concept in ISO 45003. So the standard defines them as the combination of how likely it is that someone's exposed to psychosocial hazards and how severe the harm could be. So in simple terms, these are risks to people's mental and physical health, and they come from the way work's designed and experienced, not just the work itself. And 45,003 highlights three main sources. The first is how work is organised. So things like excessive workloads, unrealistic deadlines, or lack of autonomy as well. The second is social factors. So this includes relationships, leadership styles, or lack of support, or bullying perhaps. And the third is the work environment. For example, working in isolation, working remotely, unsafe conditions, or potentially even high pressure environments. What's important is that these risks don't just affect mental health, they also lead to physical health issues and have a significant organisational impact, including absenteeism, lower productivity. It can also increase turnover. So managing these psychosocial risks is not just a wellbeing initiative, it's a core part of effective health and safety management. I just want to take go through a couple of examples with you. You'll likely recognise some of these. The first one that I'm going to cover is high workload or unrealistic deadlines. This example is actually really common in legal consulting, normally finance and often the technology sectors, where employees feel the pressure to remain constantly available to demonstrate commitment. And over time, that sustained overload is going to create that chronic stress and exhaustion. And organisations sometimes will mistake that overwork for high performance, but the long-term effect is going to be disengagement, it's going to be mistakes, it's going to be poorer client outcomes, and it's going to be increased attrition. And then there's constant organisational change. So periods of organisational change will often create uncertainty and fear. Employees may worry about changing expectations. They might worry about job security. They could worry about increased workload. And lack of communication from organisational change can increase stress and rumours. So ISO 45003 highlights the importance of involving workers early in change processes. And then finally, it's just consider one more, and that's poor management behaviours or lack of support. So employees experiencing bullying, for example, often become reluctant to raise safety concerns, and this creates a wider organisational risk. Toxic leadership can spread, for example, through teams, and it becomes normal behaviour. ISO 45003 emphasises the importance of dignity, respect, and fair treatment in the workplace culture. So these examples that I've just given you, they're not unusual. They exist in most organisations, but unmanaged, they become risks. So again, I just want to come back to why they matter. These risks have real consequences. And as we've already explored, they impact mental health, they affect physical health and safety, and they directly impact performance. So managing these risks is not just the right thing to do, it's critical for organisational effectiveness. I want to spend a moment here because this is often what people are really looking for when it comes to ISO 45003, and that's what do we actually do if we're considering it. So my first suggestion is about building awareness with senior leaderships. Do not underestimate this, because it needs to be understood as a risk, not just another wellbeing initiative. Second, I would review your existing data, your surveys, your absence, your turnover. You likely already have some of the insight into what your risks are. Third, you should identify your top 2 or 3 psychosocial risks. So don't try and tackle everything. Look at what the biggest things are, and pick no more than 2 or 3 to tackle. Fourth, take visible, practical action. So even small changes are going to build that bit of credibility. And then finally, measure and refine. So this is an ongoing process. It's not a one-off thing, a one-off project that we do. It's actually something that we come back and we refine again and again. And I maybe would have said it in the intro, but forgot. I actually did this accreditation twice within the space of 18 months at the organisation, mainly because of our risk management cycles. So it is very common to go back and revisit this as part of your risk management cycles. So before we come towards the end of the presentation, I just want to talk about what happens if we do nothing. Well, we actually don't have to imagine that anymore. Emily's already given us an example from the Jockey Club, and there are quite a few other cases that have demonstrated what happens when we don't do anything. And here's another example I just want to spend a bit of time on. And I'm hoping that maybe you've already heard of it, but recently the Health and Safety Executive carried out a formal inspection of University of Birmingham's arrangements for managing work-related stress, and that was following a complaint from union representatives about excessive workload and stress. The HSE found that the university failed to adequately manage their psychosocial risks. In this case, it was related to work-related stress. They didn't have effective, consistent stress risk assessments. The university relied on generic or high-level assessments rather than localized controls. They also had weak monitoring systems for stress-related harm, and they didn't ensure effective implementation of their own stress risk assessment, their stress management policy. And they also found that the university couldn't demonstrate it was properly controlling work-related stress risk across the organisation. So what this led to was an enforcement action in the form of a notice of contravention or a material breach finding under health and safety law. So let me just go through what was in the findings. The consistent themes were around stress. Stress was being addressed after the harm had occurred, but not managed systematically as a foreseen risk. So this is where ISO 45003 becomes highly relevant, because it sets out how organisations should manage psychological health and health, well-being and psychosocial risks at work. The HSE findings strongly suggest that there were quite a few gaps with the University of Birmingham. So it says that in ISO 45003 principles, it says you should systematically identify psychosocial hazards. The issue that was at Birmingham University was that risk assessments were described as too generic and not role specific, so missing real workload drivers. Then there was participation and consultation. So the issue at Birmingham Uni was that staff weren't meaningfully involved in shaping risk controls or assessment design. Then there was integration into the Occupational Health and Safety Management System. So the issue at Birmingham was that controls were inconsistent. Stress management appeared fragmented across departments rather than system-wide. And then finally, the approach was not prevention focused. So the issue at Birmingham Uni was that their approach was largely reactive. So they were responding to burnout and they were responding to sickness absence rather than preventing causes like workload design. So with that in mind, you might be thinking about what your next step is. Well, I'm going to hand over to Emily now, who's going to start telling you how you can start mitigating these risks straight away. You're on mute, Emily.
Thank you.
No worries.
One of the easiest next steps, and I think this links into one of the questions that I wrote a few questions down for you, Vicky, just while people are thinking for some in the background as well, is it sounds simple. It actually sounds like the easiest thing to do to ensure that we're following the legal obligations, even the HSE management standards, to get workplaces to a point where they're legally covered, but they're also preventing work-related stress, preventing burnout, and getting all those great outcomes that we found. But if it sounds so simple, why does the standard feel so overwhelming? Because it is a big standard. I have looked at it, as you said, it took over 18 months for you to get through it. Why does it feel so overwhelming for people? And it obviously does. And it may be a while for anyone in this room to get to the point where they're able to actually implement ISO 45003. So we just really want to help with the next step. We actually have a CPD 3-hour session coming up that will get you started in developing and implementing your stress management program, how to audit, preventative stress risk assessments, reactive stress risk assessments, policy. We're going to cover all of that in 3 hours, and it's CPD. You will get a CPD certificate at the end of it. And I'm just going to pop the link into the chat box. We've got 50% of tickets gone already, so don't hang around. We do expect these to go over the next week or so as we're promoting it. But just to answer that question, Vicky, you made it sound so simple, but I think we even had someone in the chat box saying that it feels overwhelming. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience for you? How long did it take? What were the challenges you had to overcome? How hard was it to get leadership buy-in? How much in terms of time and resource did this take?
That's a great question, and I could probably spend another half an hour talking about that. Let me start with the why we did it. We had won a number of awards at the organisation, but it was a large and complex organisation, and we wanted to have something more related to the systems, the processes that we had in the organisation that was really showed that we were walking the walk, not just getting an award, as amazing as they are, but not just getting an award and sticking it on a mantelpiece and forgetting about it. I was involved in the whole of the process, so I led the business case for it. I took it to the organisation. It was already an organisation that had a number of other standards, including ISO 45001. Leadership buy-in wasn't challenging at the time because it came out during COVID and visibly demonstrating what the organisation was doing to support their employees being happy, healthy, and safe at work was a key part of the health, safety, and wellbeing program anyway. I'm trying to remember what all the elements of your question was there, Emily. I guess you said you talked about why it's, why does it feel overwhelming? So my honest answer is it is a big job. It's a big project. Um, the way we approached it was to do our own internal audit first and look at the requirements of the standard, and sort of measure where we've got primary, secondary, and tertiary interventions, look at the systems and processes that we had in place. And it was end to end, from onboarding to exit as well. So what is there within the organisation? That took quite a bit of time. I think it was about 6 to 8 months that we took to prepare. And that involved, getting the sign off for the business case, to actually going through the standard, to engaging the rest of the business where relevant, because this isn't just about a well-being, health and safety initiative, it's business wide. So there was a lot of business-wide sort of communications, preparedness, why are we doing this, why are we asking to commit your time and resource to it. So yeah, I wouldn't say it was an easy task, but it was quite fulfilling. Um, I talk really passionately about it because we were one of the first organisations, without giving too much away about where I worked, we were one of the first organisations to get ISO 45003 standard. And then we, because of our risk management systems, as I've already mentioned, we actually did the re-accreditation, or went through the process again. And I call it accreditation. It's not an accreditation. It's something that it's guidance that you align your organisation to, but people do call it sometimes accredited or certified, even though there's no official document that says that. Does that
Okay.
answer all the elements of your question?
Yeah, sorry, I probably just overloaded you with loads of questions that I had. So I'm going to come over. Just thought we'd go into questions now, Vicky, actually, because we do have a couple more questions in the chat box. Let me have a little look. So, Gemma, why do we suppose that ISO 35003 is not certifiable in itself? Only from an optics perspective, it feels like certification could increase engagement and elevate the topic.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I don't know the answer to that. I think it should be, organisations should have to do it to show that they are supporting their organisation with psychological and psychosocial well-being. Um, maybe we can start a movement now to make sure that it does become mandatory, but at the moment it's seen as an extension essentially to the ISO 45001 in terms of mental well-being.
Yeah.
But
This is
Gemma,
this
maybe
is
you and I can get together and
You
start
start the
championing it.
movement.
Start the
I was just
movement.
going to ask anyone in the chat box in the room today, is your organization already required to have ISO 45001 for like tenders, maybe if you're in construction? Because that's been progress, hasn't it? Now certain industries are required to have ISO 45001 and other ISO standards to apply for certain tenders. And I think so. We do some close work with the Supply Chain Sustainability School. You can't say that after a couple of tequilas, that's for certain. But we work with them, and they've said that there are many tenders now where you have to tick a box to say that you have mental health first aiders trained to apply for certain tenders in construction. So could this potentially be the next movement that we get to? Is that actually it goes from a requirement for 45,001 into also having that 45,003 at the other end of it. So Steph saying not required yet. Company have a 5,001 orders coming up. Okay. So yeah, I mean it's going to be interesting, isn't it? Just from that question around it should be definitely. Maybe we just need things to evolve a little bit further to help to get us there. Okay, so question from Rapinda. I'd be interested in further training specific to ISO 35003 without the physical health and safety aspect. Is there anything like that available? I don't know of anything available, Rapinda. We can support you through consultative support mechanism to help you to achieve it. But as far as I know, I haven't seen any training. Have you, Vicky?
I haven't seen any specific training yet
No, no. But if
relating
you,
to it, other than webinars,
yeah.
that tend to pop up occasionally of people talking about it.
Yeah. Okay. We've got another question from David. How are people measuring progress? And then he followed up with another kind of statement, really. I'm thinking staff turnover, churn from voluntary resignations, absence rates are results of employee pulse surveys. So, yeah, specific measures of progress within that standard.
So for us, so it was a couple of years ago that I went through this with the organisation, but for us that you get a report at the end of your audit, at the end of your review, and it gives you what the opportunities for improvement are. So almost that continuous improvement cycle. So in between when we were first accredited to the second time, we looked at those either non-conformities or opportunities for improvement, and you have a period of time, not in the same way as the HSE, but you have a period of time to improve on those or to actually turn your non-conformities around and introduce, a new process, a system, a resource, whatever it might be that you didn't align to. So that's one of the best ways of measuring success. But also, we had a lot of employees coming into the organisation at the time that were coming based on the reputation of having the standard. So a couple of years ago, it was seen as a forward-thinking organisation to have ISO 45003, and a number of employees that came through, the recruitment process actually called out the fact that we had it, and that was one of the drivers for them to come. So, but we also made sure that processes were well embedded in the organisation from onboarding to exit and continuously. So it's just for us, it was a continuous improvement cycle of making sure that all the feedback that we were getting from employees, particularly in terms of, worker consultation, were acted on and logged in our very large Excel document, I have to say, by the time that I finished. But yeah, all logged within the system and within the risk management system as well, so they could be monitored and they would be actionable.
Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
Vicky, yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's a Rapinda she just said would help wellbeing leads in terms of their own development. So Rapinda, as I mentioned at the start, we have a foundation degree equivalent for strategic wellbeing leads at a level 5. And one of the things, and I've worked in this field for 10 years, and one of the things that I have found is the majority of organizations do not even yet have the basics for compliance of your duty of care under the Health and Safety Act to protect the health, safety, and welfare of employees. And they're very much, I was going to say 99% of the time, are not compliant with the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regs 1999. So they don't even have the basics of using the management standards, preventative stress risk assessments, regular auditing. So we actually have that in our level 5 qualification because that is your legal requirement. Whereas this ISO 45003 standard, it isn't, it's not a legal requirement. So if the majority of organizations are not even legally compliant yet, that's where we have to start. And that's why we've put this CPD course on to say, look, it is kind of a little bit out there. Chances are you're probably not quite yet even legally compliant with what's already out there. And as we've seen from the Jockey Club and the Birmingham University, there is a risk to that, and that's what we need to get right first. And one of the questions I put in the chat box was, if HSE was to come in tomorrow, and all HSE need is more than one person from the same organisation to say, I've been experiencing work-related stress. Nobody's doing anything about it for the HSE to come in and investigate, or a union could whistleblow. So if HSE were to come in tomorrow into your business, do you think that you would pass that investigation around work-related stress? Because that's a question for you. And how comfortable are you as HR, health and safety, occupational health, as the wellbeing lead, that this is your responsibility, or you're accountable for part of this, leadership are accountable for it, that we're even not there yet. So absolutely agree with you. More training needs to be done. We've got the legal obligations in our level 5, which we're going to share as this mini masterclass series. But yeah, I think we've got to get the basics and the legal obligations right as well first. Some really good questions. Let's have a little look further down here. Claire is saying, can we take learning from Australia, obviously with their psychosocial hazards, legal obligations that they now have in place, Vicky?
Yeah, I definitely think that we can. I follow a lot of the articles that come out from Australia and a lot of the legislation that's coming in there. I think that we've got a lot to learn. I think we are a little bit behind the curve. I think we're certainly tracking in the right direction. But for me, some of these core well-being related and mental health related guides should be way more taken into. I'm having a problem with my words now, Emily. They should be they should be not mandatory, but they should be complied in organisations, because not only does it demonstrate that organisations are supporting their staff and not just saying that they're supporting their staff, but it's something that they can go back to and revisit time after time.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely lots to learn from Australia, I think.
Yes, all eyes are definitely on Australia, but again, like I've said, in this country, we already have legal requirements.
Yeah.
There is already compliance in place. If we can't get that right, it doesn't matter what Australia's doing, we still haven't got our own ducks in order,
Yeah.
really, in terms of that. Okay, do you want to go through? I can't see any more questions. Do you want to go through your final kind of takeaways, Vicky?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to bring this together as we come to the end of the webinar. So for me, I think it's important to be clear on what ISO 45003 and what it isn't. It's a framework. It's going to give you structure. It's going to give you a common language and a way of thinking about psychosocial risk, but it's not a checklist to complete or something that you can just implement and then walk away from. It's importantly, it shifts the conversation away from well-being as something separate to something that's much more fundamental. It's about managing risk in in the way that work is designed, in the way work is led, and the way work is experienced every day. And from what I've seen in practice, the organisations that get the most value from this are the ones that don't overcomplicate it. So they start, which is what happened with us. We started somewhere and we started. And even if that's small, even if it's imperfect, you don't need to get this right first time. You don't need a fully mature model to actually start, and you don't need perfect data either. What matters is making progress. So taking a structured, practical approach, you learn as you go, and we certainly did. And you build that momentum over time. So it often just starts with focusing on a few key risks and doing something meaningful about them. But if I leave you with one final thought, it would be this: the biggest shift isn't actually in the framework, it's in the conversations. So when leaders start asking better questions, and when teams feel able to talk openly about workload, about pressure, and about how it really feels working in an organisation, not just what's on paper, that's when ISO 45003 comes to life in a real and practical way. And ultimately, that's where you're going to see the most meaningful and lasting change. So there you are.
I think that's really important as well, because I don't know if anyone saw the King's speech. Was it yesterday? Was it yesterday? Obviously, our economy is essential for human health and well-being, and